exactly will happen on Friday if the vote is so close? Joe Twyman is from YouGov and Ned Simons is assistant political editor at the Huffington Post. Really, Joe, no majority whatsoever? You sure about that?
The polls haven't moved since the start of the campaign. They actually haven't moved since the start of the year. It's not just going to be a hung parliament, it's going to be a very hung parliament.
Very well hung parliament, OK. Ned, this is what we had last time, a hung parliament, but it's not going to be the same this time necessarily.
No, it's going to be completely different, I think. I mean, it's interesting there you spoke about how the Tories could get the most seats on Joe's polls there. And we had the Tory-Lib Dem coalition last time. I think the Lib Dems are looking to go into government with anyone they can. I think the leadership would prefer to stay with the Tories. The problem for them is, of course, that it would be a nightmare. Their internal nightmare would be to actually be able to choose, because that would split the Lib Dems down the middle themselves. They'd rather the numbers did it for them.
Because we've had Nick Clegg and Danny Alexander as part of the Quad, but if the party loses a lot of seats, that could all change.
And also after the election, of course, if Clegg loses his seat, if Danny Alexander loses his seat, they'll have to have a leadership election. But the initial discussion around what the Lib Dems do will probably have to be done under the existing leadership. So you could end up in a situation where the people who decide what the Lib Dems do aren't actually in charge of the party once it comes to governing.
Joe, the other coalition option, you would imagine, would be Labour, potentially with the SNP. It looks like the SNP are going to do incredibly well in Scotland. Labour could perhaps have enough seats with them to form a coalition.
Well, I don't think that's a coalition option. I think it's a minority government option, because Ed Miliband has come out very forcefully saying no deals, no agreements, no coalition, no confidence and supply. What he's effectively doing is fronting it out. He's challenging the SNP to blink first. He's saying you have a choice. You can either side with us and then between us we'll get maybe 310, maybe 315 seats, which could be combined more than the Lib Dems and the Conservatives, or you can vote against us and let the Conservatives in. And he's hoping that they will effectively give in and offer their support in exchange for nothing.
Ned, we've heard talk of things like rainbow coalitions previously. Just what is that, and how many parties could join the party?
I think that's interesting. In terms of what the result will be, I think we'll see that Labour has the easiest option towards that majority. There's the SNP, as Joe says. There's also the Green MP, how many they get. There's all these other smaller parties, and from Northern Ireland as well, that could combined, I think, have a more kind of anti-Tory alliance that could beat the Conservatives. The problem for Labour is that alliance is quite fluid and quite hard to rely on, whereas a Conservative Lib Dem deal is kind of more solid and in public opinion might look more kind of like it will stay for longer.
Joe, you briefly mentioned the idea of minority government then. Just briefly explain how that works and what it is.
Well, minority government is that no one party has a majority and indeed has no formal arrangements, no agreements with other parties in order to guarantee the kind of formal arrangement that we have at the moment with the Lib Dems and the Conservatives. What may happen next time around is the Lib Dems may side with the Conservatives, choose to side with the Conservatives in a formal arrangement, and that would, if you like, go up against Labour and the SNP, potentially with more seats combined, but without that formal arrangement. And then it gets very interesting, because David Cameron may have more seats as the single party.
As your poll suggests, yeah.
Exactly, and he may then refuse to leave Downing Street. He may say, hang on, I've got the most seats, I'm maintaining the unity of the country, I'm maintaining the defence of the realm, and so come at me, bro.
I think that's what he'd say. I'm not entirely sure. The thing is, Ned, about minority government, incredibly difficult just to get anything done.
Yeah, and I think we'll see what happens if Labour do decide to rule as minority government, which I think would be their preference over a formal coalition, even with the Lib Dems. But every vote will be kind of a high-stakes game, and also every vote will be decided on different alliances there as well.
Which is why we're then back to this idea of confidence and supply. Haven't really had that here, have we, so far?
No, and I think that relies on the kind of other parties promising to vote for the Queen's speech and the budget of the main party. So Labour would rely on the SNP to vote with it, to vote through its programme, whereas on other votes it wouldn't have to do that. So any other kind of bit it didn't agree with, it could just happily vote against them. You could end up, for instance, on Trident, with the Labour having to get the Tory support to get Trident through. On other votes, they'd get the Lib Dems. It would be quite an interesting, vote-by-vote mishmash.
So many permutations, a lot of known unknowns, as some politician once said. Joe, Ned, thank you both very much indeed.